The sharp crack of a pool gate slamming open jolted Martin from his morning coffee ritual. Through his kitchen window, he watched as Deborah Winters, known throughout Sycamore Estates as the HOA Karen, marched across his back patio like she owned it, trailing behind her 5 children who were definitely not hers. "Martin," her voice cut through the peaceful morning. "Your pool temperature is 2 degrees below regulation. I scheduled these children for swim lessons and I can't have them getting cold." Martin nearly choked on his coffee. This was the first he'd heard about any swim lessons in his private pool, let alone any temperature regulations. But that was classic Deborah, creating rules on the spot that somehow only benefited her latest scheme. "I don't recall agreeing to host swim lessons," Martin said, stepping onto his patio in his bathrobe. Deborah's perfectly highlighted blonde bob didn't move an inch as she tilted her head. The smile that spread across her face never reached her eyes. "Oh, Martin, don't you remember? The HOA board meeting last month, we voted that all private pools must be made available for community children's activities when requested by the Activities Committee." She tapped the gold pin on her lapel, a custom-made HOA board president badge she commissioned with HOA funds. "I don't remember that vote," Martin said, watching as the children began unpacking swim gear. "That's because you left early to deal with that ridiculous fence color violation of yours," Deborah said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It passed unanimously after you left. I have the documentation right here." She produced a folder from her designer tote bag, flipping to a page that sure enough contained what appeared to be meeting minutes with his absence noted. The children were already dipping their toes in his pool while a young woman, presumably the swim instructor, began setting up equipment. "You'll be compensated, of course," Deborah continued. "A standard rate is $25 per session for facility usage, and these lessons will only be 3 times a week for the next 8 weeks. Martin's jaw clenched. "Deborah, this is my private property." "Community property subject to HOA regulations," she corrected, her smile never wavering. "Unless you prefer we discuss your unapproved garden gnome collection at next week's violation hearing instead." Her perfectly manicured finger pointed to the ceramic figures Martin's late wife had collected. The veiled threat hung in the air. Martin had already accumulated 2 violations this month for trivial infractions Deborah had personally reported. A third would mean significant fines. "Fine, 3 days a week," he conceded. "Wonderful." Deborah's voice lifted with false cheer. "Oh, and the instructor needs a key to your gate, for convenience." Before Martin could protest, Deborah had plucked his spare key from the hook by the patio door. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the children, "welcome to your first official Sycamore Estates Swim Academy session." Then turning back to Martin with a whisper, "And don't worry about raising the pool temperature. I've already called a service to handle it. They'll be added to your HOA account." As Deborah settled into Martin's patio lounger with her planner, he retreated inside, fingers trembling with rage as he reached for his phone. It was time to call the one person who had successfully stood up to Deborah before, his new neighbor Eleanor, who had her own score to settle with the HOA Karen. Eleanor Chen answered on the 3rd ring, her voice still carrying the slight rasp of mourning. Martin quickly explained the situation while watching through his blinds as Deborah directed the swim instructor like a general deploying troops. "She's pulling the same stunt she tried with the Rodriguez family last summer," Eleanor said. "Except they fought back and won. I'll bring over the bylaws. Don't sign anything." 30 minutes later, Eleanor arrived with a leather portfolio and a determined expression. A corporate attorney who worked remotely, she had moved to Sycamore Estates 6 months ago and immediately butted heads with Deborah over a disputed tree removal. Eleanor had won that battle through meticulous documentation and legal precision, qualities that had made her Deborah's most formidable adversary. "Let's observe first," Eleanor whispered as they watched from Martin's living room. Outside, Deborah had transformed Martin's peaceful backyard into a bustling swim school. What caught Eleanor's attention wasn't the children, who were being well instructed, but the parents arriving to drop off additional kids. Each handed Deborah what appeared to be cash. "She's charging them," Martin realized aloud. "This isn't an HOA program at all." Eleanor nodded grimly. "She's running a business on your property." They stepped outside just as Deborah was counting bills inside her designer planner. She quickly snapped it shut when she spotted them. "Eleanor." What surprise, Deborah's voice shifted to a higher, sweeter register. "Are you interested in adult swim lessons? We have a Thursday evening class starting next week." "Actually, I'm here about these minutes," Eleanor replied, holding up a copy of the document Deborah had shown Martin. "Fascinating reading, especially since I attended that entire meeting, and this vote never happened." The smile on Deborah's face froze. There must be some confusion. Perhaps it was a special session, which would require 72-hour notice to all homeowners per Article 4, Section 3 of the bylaws. Eleanor continued smoothly. No such notice was provided. A mother approaching with a young child hesitated at the gate. "Is this the Sycamore Swim Academy? I prepaid for the 6-week package." Deborah's neck flushed red. "We're just having a small administrative discussion. Please come in." "Actually," Martin interjected, finding his voice, "there's been a misunderstanding. There are no swim lessons today." The woman frowned. "But I paid $300 last week at the clubhouse. Mrs. Winters issued me a receipt." Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. $300? The HOA rate was supposedly $25 per session. Deborah's composure cracked slightly. The difference covers equipment, insurance, and the instructor's fee. "Which insurance carrier?" Eleanor asked innocently. "Because I checked with the HOA's provider this morning. They're unaware of any swim program being covered under our policy." The swim instructor, overhearing this, climbed out of the pool. "Mrs. Winters assured me this was all approved and insured. I can't teach without proper coverage." Deborah's eyes darted between Eleanor, Martin, the instructor, and gathering parents. For a moment, Martin almost felt sorry for her, until he noticed her recalculating, regrouping. "There's been a procedural hiccup," Deborah announced to the group, her voice projecting confidence she clearly didn't feel. "Classes will resume tomorrow at the community pool instead. Same schedule, no additional charge." The parents seemed placated, but the instructor looked skeptical. "The community pool is closed for renovations until July. That's why you said we needed this location." A collective murmur rose from the parents. Deborah's perfect smile strained at the corners. "A minor setback," she insisted. "I'll email everyone with the new arrangement by this evening. Martin has unfortunately decided to withdraw his community support." And just like that, she had twisted the situation to make Martin the villain. Several parents shot him disapproving looks as they collected their children. Eleanor stepped forward. "Before anyone leaves, you should know that HOA has no record of any payments for this program. If you paid Mrs. Winters directly, that's enough." Deborah cut in sharply. "This is an internal HOA matter that doesn't concern you, Eleanor." But the damage was done. Parents were exchanging troubled glances, and one was already photographing the receipt in her hand. As the backyard slowly emptied, Deborah gathered her things with deliberate calm. Only when she passed Martin did he see the cold fury in her eyes. "This isn't over," she whispered. "The violation committee meets tomorrow. I'd check your mailbox if I were you." Martin's mailbox contained exactly what Deborah had threatened, a violation of unauthorized commercial activity on his property. The irony might have been laughable if the potential fine wasn't $500 per day, retroactively applied to the entire week. "She's unbelievable," Eleanor said, examining the official-looking document over coffee at Martin's kitchen table. "She's accusing you of running the very business she created." Martin rubbed his temples. "The violation committee meets at 7 tonight. Most of them are Deborah's pickleball friends. They'll rubber stamp whatever she wants." "Not if we're prepared," Eleanor replied, her attorney instincts kicking in. Deborah made a crucial mistake by leaving a paper trail. Those parents have receipts, and that swim instructor has texts. We just need to gather evidence before the meeting. They spent the afternoon building their case. Martin contacted his pool service company, who confirmed receiving instructions from Deborah to increase his water temperature and charge it to his account. Eleanor interviewed 3 parents who paid Deborah directly for what they'd been told was an official HOA-sponsored program. By 6:30, they had assembled a damning collection of evidence. As they walked toward the clubhouse for the meeting, Martin's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meeting location changed to 74 Maple Drive. Parking limited. Arrive early." Martin showed Eleanor the message. "Deborah's house," he explained. "She's moving the meeting." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "That's not allowed under the bylaws. Violation hearings must be held at the clubhouse or community center." "Tell that to Deborah." Martin sighed. "She's stacking the deck even further." They decided to split up. Eleanor would go to the clubhouse to intersect any committee members who had received the last-minute change, while Martin headed to Deborah's house. The sprawling 2-story colonial on Maple Drive was lit up like a Christmas. The next morning, Martin awoke to the sound of splashing. He blinked groggily at his bedside clock, 6:15 a.m., before the realization hit him. Someone was in his pool. He threw on his robe and rushed to the window. Below, Deborah stood on his patio in a crisp white tennis outfit, clipboard in hand, directing a new swim instructor and 4 children through morning exercises. Martin stormed outside. "What do you think you're doing?" Deborah turned with practiced surprise. "Following procedure, Martin, I filed the proper facilities use form." She handed him an official-looking document. "As stipulated in Bylaw Amendment 23B, homeowners must be given 24-hour written notice before denial of community activity usage. Your notice of refusal wasn't properly submitted yesterday, so the scheduled activities continue as planned until formal proceedings conclude." Martin scanned the document, which indeed contained language about notice requirements. This amendment isn't in my copy of the bylaws. It was passed last quarter, Deborah replied smoothly. Notice was sent to all homeowners. Not my fault if you don't read your HOA correspondence. The instructor, a college-aged young man who looked uncomfortable, avoided eye contact with Martin. The children, already in the pool, continued their lessons. I've also filed a counter-complaint regarding your spreading of malicious falsehoods about HOA operations, Deborah continued, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the parents arriving with more children. The review committee will address both matters next week. Until then, the program continues. Martin was about to protest when his phone rang. Eleanor. Don't argue with her, Eleanor advised when he explained the situation. That's exactly what she wants. I've been up all night researching. Meet me at the coffee shop in 20 minutes. At Perks and Brew, Eleanor spread documents across their table. She's done this before, she explained, pointing to news articles about a development in the neighboring town. Deborah Winters, former HOA president at Oak Ridge Commons, forced to resign after an investigation into misappropriation of community funds for personal business ventures. Martin's eyes widened. She never mentioned living at Oak Ridge. Because she left under a cloud, Eleanor continued, but she learned from her mistakes. This time she's created a paper trail that makes everything look official. She tapped a stack of meeting minutes. These amendments she claims were passed, never legally voted on, but she's filed them with the county as if they were. So what do we do? Eleanor leaned forward. We play her game, but better. I've requested an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. As a homeowner, you can force a review of any rule that directly impacts your property. She'll just stack that meeting with her supporters. Eleanor smiled. That's why I've already contacted 17 homeowners who've had run-ins with Deborah. They'll all be there. And I've invited the County HOA Oversight Commission. Martin left the coffee shop with a renewed sense of hope, only to find his driveway blocked by a tow truck. The driver was hooking up to Martin's car. What's going on? Martin demanded. HOA violation, the driver explained, showing him a work order. Vehicle reported as improperly parked, obstructing emergency access. Martin's car was in his own driveway, perfectly positioned. Who reported this? The driver shrugged, order signed by D. Winters, HOA president. By the time Martin resolved the towing situation, at a cost of $175, he returned home to find a violation notice taped to his front door. Apparently, his garbage can have been left at the curb 12 minutes past the permitted time. Another fine. Inside, he heard splashing from the backyard. Through the kitchen window, he watched as Deborah conducted what appeared to be a full-fledged swimming class with at least 8 children in his pool. Parents were dropping off and picking up kids in shifts. A small table had been set up where Deborah was accepting payments, issuing receipts, and checking names off a list. His phone pinged with an email notification from the HOA account. Asterisk, due to scheduled maintenance at the community pool, all summer aquatic programs have been temporarily relocated to alternative facilities. We thank homeowner Martin Reynolds for his community spirit in hosting the children's swim instruction program. Registration fees have been adjusted to reflect the enhanced private pool experience. Asterisk. The pool maintenance technician arrived after dark, long after Deborah and her last swim student had departed. Martin greeted him with a firm handshake and led him to the backyard equipment shed. So you want to adjust your heating system? The technician asked, reviewing the work order. Planning a party? Something like that, Martin replied. I need precise control of the water temperature. How cold can you make it? The technician raised an eyebrow. The system isn't designed for cooling, just heating. Though we could turn the heater off entirely. In April, with overnight temperatures dropping to the 40s, natural cooling would take it down significantly. That's not cold enough, Martin said. What about adding something to the system? For the next hour, they discussed technical possibilities and limitations. The solution they devised wasn't technically against HOA regulations. After all, homeowners were permitted to maintain their pools according to their preferences, and nowhere did the bylaws specify minimum temperature requirements. I'll need you to sign a waiver, the technician said finally. This modification is unconventional. I understand, Martin replied, signing the document, and I need this completed tonight. After the technician left, Martin called Eleanor to explain his plan. Her initial response was silence, followed by a reluctant chuckle. It's petty, she admitted. Possibly brilliant, definitely risky, but legally defensible if she complains. Your pool, your temperature preferences. Exactly, Martin said. Let her explain to parents why she's running a business on my property against my wishes. The next morning, Martin was awake well before dawn. He sat by his kitchen window with a cup of coffee, waiting. At precisely 6 o'clock a.m., Deborah's luxury SUV pulled into his driveway. She emerged in her tennis dress, followed by the young swim instructor carrying equipment. Martin savored the moment as they rounded the corner to the backyard. 3, 2, 1. What have you done? Deborah's shriek pierced the morning quiet. Martin stepped onto his patio where Deborah stood at the edge of his pool. The water's surface had a thin, glassy sheen of ice forming around the edges. A digital thermometer mounted on the pool wall displayed a temperature of 38 degrees Fahrenheit. "Good morning, Deborah," Martin said pleasantly. "Is something wrong?" "The water is freezing," she sputtered, her face contorting with rage. "This is sabotage." "Actually, it's my preferred swimming temperature," Martin replied. "I've recently started practicing the Wim Hof method. Cold therapy has tremendous health benefits. Would you like to try it? I understand you're an enthusiast for using my pool." The swim instructor stifled a laugh, quickly masked as a cough when Deborah shot him a venomous glare. "This is deliberate interference with an HOA-sanctioned program," she hissed. "I'll have the board fine you for this." "For what exactly?" Martin asked innocently. "Maintaining my pool at my preferred temperature. I don't recall any bylaws regulating water temperature. Feel free to check the amendments, even the ones you invented." Deborah's phone was already in her hand, frantically dialing. "Change it back immediately," she commanded. "Students will be arriving in 15 minutes. I'm afraid the system needs 24 hours to return to standard temperature." Martin lied smoothly. "Safety protocols. But feel free to use it as is, or perhaps the community pool would be a better venue." "Oh wait, it's closed for renovations. Your call." Her face flushed scarlet. Deborah barked into her phone. "Cancel today's lessons. Equipment malfunction." She ended the call and fixed Martin with an icy stare that rivaled his pool. "This isn't over." "Oh, and I think it is," came a voice from the side gate. Eleanor stood there with two men in suits. "Martin, I hope you don't mind the early visit. This is Commissioner Davis from the County HOA Regulatory Board and Mr. Harmon from the District Attorney's Office, Consumer Fraud Division. They're very interested in discussing the Sycamore Swim Academy with Mrs. Winters." The blood drained for Deborah's face. "This is a private HOA matter." "Actually," Commissioner Davis interrupted, "when homeowner association funds and facilities are used for private commercial enterprises without proper licensing, tax reporting, or insurance, it becomes a county matter, and potentially a state one." Martin hadn't expected Eleanor to bring officials so soon. This wasn't part of his ice pool plan. He certainly wouldn't complain about the timing. 2 weeks passed with a strange calm settling over Sycamore Estates. The investigation into Deborah's activities continued, but she remained conspicuously absent from community spaces. Rumors circulated that she'd taken an extended vacation to visit family out of state, though Eleanor's legal contacts reported she was still meeting regularly with her attorney. Martin had returned his pool to its normal temperature and even hosted a legitimate board-approved neighborhood barbecue, a small act of community rebuilding that helped soothe tensions after the swim lesson debacle. Life was starting to feel normal again, until the certified letter arrived. Martin stared at the law firm letterhead, his coffee growing cold beside him. It was addressed from Winthrop, Hayes, and Mitchell, one of the most prestigious firms in the state, representing Deborah Winters personally, not the HOA. "She's suing me for defamation, emotional distress, and malicious interference with community welfare," Martin told Eleanor when she arrived at his house 30 minutes later. "She's claiming I deliberately sabotaged an HOA-approved program that benefited neighborhood children, causing her professional and personal harm." Eleanor scanned the legal document, her expression darkening. "This is intimidation, pure and simple. She's betting you won't want to fight a costly legal battle." "She's right," Martin admitted. "I can't afford this kind of legal fight." "You won't have to," Eleanor assured him. "This complaint is full of holes. She has no documentation that the program was officially approved, and plenty of evidence exists that she was collecting money personally. Plus," she added with a small smile, "she made a critical mistake by suing you individually rather than addressing this through HOA channels." "How is that a mistake?" "Because now we can countersue without HOA restrictions, and we can request discovery, all of her financial records, communications about the program, everything." Martin wasn't convinced. "She must know that. Why risk exposing herself further?" Eleanor tapped the letter thoughtfully. "Because she's betting on a quick settlement. Look at the damages she's claiming, $25,000. That's just below the threshold that would move this to a higher court with more scrutiny. She thinks she'll pay to make this go away rather than face mounting legal fees." "She doesn't know me very well then," Martin said, though anxiety churned in his stomach. Even with Eleanor's help, fighting this would be stressful and expensive. That evening, as Martin was grilling chicken on his patio, Howard Fletcher appeared at his back gate. "Got a minute?" the acting HOA president asked, looking uncomfortable. Over dinner, Howard revealed that Deborah had approached the board with a compromise solution to restore community harmony. She's offering to drop all personal legal actions if the HOA agrees to a full amnesty regarding the program finances, Howard explained. No further investigation, no claims process for refunds. She'll resign as president but retain her committee positions. In exchange, all homeowners who raise complaints would sign non-disclosure agreements. Martin set down his fork. She's trying to buy her way out of fraud charges. Howard sighed. Several board members see it as a practical solution. Legal battles drain the HOA reserve fund, which means higher dues for everyone. And some of the programs she ran were genuinely popular. The summer camp, the seniors' fitness classes. Popular doesn't make them legitimate, Martin pointed out. I know, Howard agreed. But she's leveraging the lawsuit against you to pressure the board. She's hinted that if we don't accept her terms, she'll pursue her case against you aggressively and implicate the HOA for failing to properly supervise her activities. Blackmail on top of fraud, Martin muttered. Howard looked miserable. The vote is tomorrow night. I wanted you to know what's coming. After Howard left, Martin called Eleanor to relay the conversation. Her response was immediate and decisive. We need to move first, she said. I've been gathering statements from affected homeowners. Commissioner Davis has enough evidence for potential criminal charges, but the process is slow. If Deborah gets the board to grant amnesty and everyone signs NDAs, it could complicate the case. What can we do? Martin asked. Remember those parents with receipts? And the swim instructor? We need them to file formal complaints with the DA's office before the board votes, create public records that can't be erased by private agreements. Martin spent the night making calls, coordinating with Eleanor to contact every affected